Hi, I'm Jeremy Crosby.
And I'm Nick Boucher. We're your hosts for the program that's all about your city, Talking Fitchburg.
Every weekday, we pull together the news, events, and information you need to stay on top of what's happening in the city of Fitchburg.
Find Talking Fitchburg on cable TV, Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and our live stream on the web. Plus, you can find all our headlines and stories on Facebook, YouTube, and our video on demand service. This is your city.
Keep up with Talking Fitchburg and the issues affecting you and your neighbors.
Get connected, Fitchburg. Sign up for Fitchburg Connect, the city's monthly e-newsletter that keeps you informed about all the events, services, and updates that matter to you. Get it in your inbox once a month. Sign up today to get Fitchburg Connect.
On August 3rd, 2026, I'm calling to order this meeting of the Board of Public Works. First item up is roll call. We have Dave Wilburn, myself, Alder Jetzer, we have Alder Herbst, and we have Don Gutkowski. Kim Lobdell is absent with excuse today. Moving on, we've got public appearances for non-agenda items. And Mr. Joe Goss, you can come up to the microphone and you have 3 minutes.
Great. Thank you so much. If you don't mind, I'll sit down.
Please. That way you're closer to the microphone.
A good thought. All right. Well, maybe yes, maybe no. Members of the committee, I appreciate your allowing me to take a few minutes here to talk about something that's important to me. It's an odd time of year to be thinking about winter and salting slippery sidewalks. But as you know, chlorine is toxic to aquatic life, and the amount of chlorine that's showing up in our downstream lakes and rivers is increasing. What's interesting, and I brought a prop with me, a single teaspoon of salt in a 5-gallon bucket of water is actually toxic to aquatic life. And it's seemingly a very small amount, but the bad news is that once you get that chlorine in there, it's exceedingly difficult to take out. And you can dig into that if you want. It's expensive to do that as well. As you know, most of the streams in Fitchburg flow to Lake Wabiza and or the Yahara River. Last year in February, the Wabiza chloride level was 74 milligrams per liter, which is more than 6 times the EPA chronic toxicity level for aquatic life. So we've already got a bad situation. Well, one wonders how can Fitchburg residents improve those chloride levels, or at least not make them worse. An obvious answer to that is ask people to use less salt on their sidewalks and driveways. In my neighborhood, as I walk around in the wintertime, I routinely see people who have spread way too much crystal salt on their sidewalks and driveways, and it's frightening, actually. So how is it that I avoid spreading that salt on my sidewalk and driveway? I obviously need to make a safe space for everyone to walk. And I do that by using a mostly sand and partial salt mixture. And I do that by, and I've been doing this for years now, and I'll admit it publicly, I sneak into Madison after dark and steal several 5-gallon buckets of that sand salt mixture and then take it back to my residence in Fitchburg and then use it. I find that the sand creates a non-slip surface on bare ice, which is wonderful. The bit of sand infused in the bit of salt infused in the sand, of course, melts ice above 15 degrees or so. In addition, if the sun is out, that brown sand does a good job of further adding to the melting process. Now, The piles of sand are at several parks in Madison, and they are for Madison residents only, as you may be aware. And as I mentioned, I live in Fitchburg, and I'll admit it again, taking that sand from Madison is probably some sort of misdemeanor. But I'm asking you to help stop my illegal behavior by providing sand piles to the residents of Fitchburg here in our town. Perhaps these sand piles could be available at the Fitchburg recycling facility and a few parks around the community. Some additional advertising would be enormously helpful as well to make people aware that they're there and free for the taking. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
And thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Moving on to the approval of minutes. Can I get a motion to approve the July 20th meeting minutes?
Motion approved, or second.
Sounds like Dave Wilburn.
I'll second.
And Don second. Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor of the meeting minutes, say aye.
Aye.
It is unanimous. Next, report from the Director of Public Works, Mr. Tim Volker.
Good evening. Just a quick follow-up item from our last meeting on July 20th, 2026. Chair Jetzer had requested the Swan Creek sample analysis data be shared with the public. So since that meeting, we put a link to the USGA's website with that data. So if you connect to my screen, Scott, I can show where we placed that link. And if you go to the city's website and just drop down to Public Works, we have the stormwater here on the left-hand side of the screen. And at the bottom left, there's the Swan Creek monitoring page. And we added this USGS Swan Creek at Laylor Road homepage. And up pops the USGS's website with the monitoring location data. And some location images too of the site.
Yeah, so this is the USGS website, and I presume there's a way to take a step back and see other monitoring stations as well?
Yes, you can at the bottom, scroll down to the bottom of this page and kind of see all their other monitoring stations that they have in the county.
And we can click on any one to see the data?
I believe so, yes.
Nice.
With that, does anyone have any questions?
Well, thanks for doing that.
You're welcome. Next up are just a couple general items I have. We have a public involvement meeting for the proposed County Highway MM pedestrian and bicycle underpass project. The involvement meeting will be on Thursday, August 27th, 2026 from 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. at Fire Station number 3. So residents will have an opportunity to view the preliminary plans, learn about the proposed project and schedule, ask questions, and provide their feedback on the project. And this project is creating a new pedestrian and bicycle underpass underneath County Highway MM near Laniello Court. And construction is currently anticipated for next year, 2027. Another general item for the board this evening is the rate case update. The Public Service Commission notified the city last week, Thursday, that the simplified rate case that we filed was approved. So a 3% increase will be effective on September 16th, 2026, which will be shown on the fourth quarter bills for the water utility customers within the city. And then the last general item for the evening, Chair Jetzer had emailed me over the weekend asking just to kind of provide an update on the water utility cybersecurity with kind of the recent happenings in Minnesota and Michigan, and I believe also California. So a couple of things we've done this year is there was a cybersecurity evaluation that was performed by the U.S. EPA's Water Infrastructure and Cyber Resilience Division Cybersecurity Branch. So basically it was a survey sent to us, and we completed that back in March of this year, and that the U.S. EPA's Water Infrastructure and Cyber Security Branch reviewed our survey and our responses. No major red flags were depicted out of that. Kind of some of the items, one of them was just more robust passwords for our SCADA, so kind of implementing that. So right now we're just kind of working through their audit and kind of continuing to implement their recommendations. And then secondly, we received an email from the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin. It was last week with 6 recommended actions from the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. And kind of the biggest thing from that email was just to remove exposure from the internet. And that's kind of what happened in Minnesota and Michigan. So since that time we had one link that we removed, and now all remote SCADA access is made through a VPN. So no one can, look through the internet and try to access our SCADA. So any outside access would be done through VPN by our employees. And then lastly, we would look to do some additional hardening of our network when we replace the water utility servers at a future date. So that's just kind of a high-level view of some of the cybersecurity issues we've implemented recently to protect us from, what's happened in other states. With that, does anyone have any questions?
Go ahead, Dave.
Who's our software SCADA vendor? Well, I guess I don't need an answer on that, but my question is, make sure that they don't have a back door. That may call them and ask them for assistance or whatever. That they don't have a back door wasn't left, unaccounted for, that for them to do maintenance or things like that. That they should, if they have any access, it should be through a VPN also.
Correct.
Yeah. Movie War Games, the guy left the back door that was exploited.
I guess primarily I just wanted you to say on camera that we're aware of the situation and actions have been taken, and we don't feel like we're at any particular risk.
Yeah, and the audit, like I mentioned, didn't produce any major red flags, which was, a good sign there. Just kind of some minor stuff that we're working through and just kind of implementing as we have time.
Go ahead.
We were hit though. We have the what's our ability to just run the system manually? We turn the SCADA system off and we turn pumps on, and I believe we have that capability. Yeah,
I believe that the PLC, that if the SCADA goes down, we can still operate the PLC. The thing is, I believe with what happened in Minnesota,
their
is
PLCs
they were operating the PLC, so which is the kind of the computer, the brains.
Yeah. That's what got hacked in Minnesota, my
correct.
Understanding. Well, you might want to think about a contingency plan. Say, all right, things are going. They get in, they get access to the chlorinator, and they're dumping, whatever it is that we can bang, we can shut things off, and whether you got to dispatch a guy to each tower, or you you can't just throw that together and, you know, when it happens. So I would ask you, put a little thought into what that would look like.
Yeah, and we've had discussions, Strand, we're kind of going through because I believe our computers are in need of updating. So Nick from IT is sitting in on the meetings and kind of going through with Tracy and Chelsea and Barry on what to implement and how to handle it if something were to go down. So we have been having those discussions.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman, for bringing that to attention.
And then next up, just a couple project updates for the board this evening. Our 2026 street resurfacing project. Paving is complete on Speck Drive, Petersburg Circle, Merlin Street, Ryland Street, and in the Hillside Heights neighborhood. And then Research Park Drive is anticipated to be complete by the end of next week. We're currently waiting for an electrical service for the police service facility building to be installed. And then once that is complete, our contractor can commence paving of Research Park Drive. The 2026 sidewalk replacement project, a pre-construction meeting was held last week. And the contractor anticipates commencing construction on Monday, August 17th, 2026. And then our Wayland Road paved shoulders project, the pre-construction meeting is scheduled for this week, Wednesday, August 5th, 2026. And then at that meeting, we'll kind of go over the schedule, so we'll see what date the contractor anticipates starting that project, and I'll report to the board at our next meeting that start date. And then Basswood Drive, the paving and restoration are complete for that project. Our 2026 Belmar and Tower Hill utility improvement project, all underground utility work has been installed in the Belmar neighborhood. All concrete work is complete also. And then the contractor is currently installing the water main and services in the Tower Hill neighborhood. And then lastly, our Well 12, which is located in Stoner Prairie at the corner of Velt Drive and Wayfair Street. The well house, we had rejected bids I believe last year due to the cost, and we went back to redesign that project to remove the open air shelter as part of that. So we put the redesigned it, put the project back out to bid, and the bid opening is scheduled for next week, Tuesday, August 11th, 2026. So I'll report at the next Board of Public Works meeting how the bid opening turned out. Any questions?
Go ahead. The Petersburg Circle looks great. They did a nice job. Any idea, there's a big pile of rubble kind of on the street, when they would clean that up?
I can check with Zach tomorrow and shoot you an email.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
So Belmar, utility work is done and concrete work is done. So what's the schedule for paving there, and what's the anticipated schedule for paving of Tower Hill?
So paving will be there. The parking lot is part of the Belmar neighborhood. There's the apartment building on the south side of Crescent there. The parking lot, they're anticipating paving later this week. And then as far as the streets, it would be most likely next week. And then as far as Tower Hill, it's still the water main. The services, they're putting in the water main. I think they have one street left, and then most of the services, there's 60 to 70 services there, and that's kind of taken a little longer getting those installed. So that's going to be most likely later this month. And obviously weather dependent on all of this.
Right. Any other questions for Tim? Okay, moving on. Item 6A, review of utility P card and check payments. Do we have any questions on those? Dave?
Page 1, it was check 626, check 130865 to Xylem Water Solutions for the yearly lift station inspection. Just curious what they would do that our existing staff couldn't do for an inspection like that, Tim.
They look at the pumps and make sure that the pumps are operating appropriately.
Okay, thank you.
Tim, you had, it's on page 2 and 3. One's $8 or $9 and the other's $353. It's a DNR general permit, but what is DNR WS2 WT3E pay serve? What's that?
What page was that?
It's on page 2 and 3.
Okay.
They're both fees for DNR general, and one's the permit. But I didn't know what the merchant thing was.
So the DNR typically charges when we pay with our P card, there's a fee associated with us paying online, and that's a certain percentage of the permit fee. So that's what that smaller fee is.
Okay. And then the bigger one's just
Is the actual
permit
fee,
okay.
Correct. So typically anytime you'll see with the DNR, there'll be two charges, a smaller charge for that merchant fee, and then the larger charge, which is typically the permit.
Okay.
All right, seeing no further questions, we'll move on to the action items. We have agenda item 7A. I'm looking for a motion to approve ordinance 2026-0-21, creating a traffic impact analysis requirement for new developments by amending sections 24-3, 24-9, and 25-2 of the Fitchburg Code of Ordinances.
I'll move approval of 2026-021.
Thank you, Dave. Do we have a
Second.
Second from Don. All right. Tim, you want to introduce Ross for this?
Yes, we have Ross Kaler, our senior project engineer in transportation, to kind of give a little background on this ordinance change. So currently the city ordinances are vague when it comes to transportation impact analysis. So Ross, over the last couple of months, has worked hard, given his workload to fit this in. And basically, this ordinance change and the accompanying TIA guidelines will give developers a starting point and clearly outline what information is required for each level of TIA. So I'll kind of let Ross go a little bit more into detail on specifically what the guidelines do and the changes that are coming about with this ordinance.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. So like Tim said, our ordinances are kind of vague right now on when a TIA needs to be submitted. We make it clear that a TIA does need to be submitted for all of our new developments, but this new ordinance change explicitly states when in the process, which is at the very beginning, it needs to be submitted, and the guidelines make it very clear to developers what information they need to submit, because that's always something that we go back and forth with these developers on is, what actual data they need to give us. And then, sometimes it costs them more money than they're expecting. And now there's very clear guidelines. There shouldn't be any confusion over how much it will cost them to give us this information. So what you have in front of you is this ordinance change, which spells that out. And then separate from the ordinance is the guidelines that are also included in your packet. Those guidelines are not being adopted by Board of Public Works or Council. Those will just be on our website and provided to developers. And the reason we're kind of doing it that way is so that staff can update and make changes to these guidelines as necessary if the level of development or the transportation needs of Fitchburg change over time. So there's also a memo summarizing these guidelines attached in your packet. So I can kind of go through that. Basically, there's 4 types of TIAs. They get more detailed as the number of trips in a TIA increases. The smallest is a site review. The largest is called a large development. It's kind of quantified by the number of peak hour trips. So as you get more peak hour trips, you have to provide more information to us. Also in that summary document, I've got examples of existing Fitchburg developments that fit those that size of development. So just so you have some context. One other thing that I want to point out is motor vehicle LOS, or level of service, is an industry standard evaluation that almost any consultant that does TIAs can provide. And then a new thing that we're looking at with these guidelines is a bike and pedestrian level of service. So this is a scoring system that Middleton uses, and also other municipalities around the country. Middleton is just the only one that I could find in Dane County that uses it. But it basically gives a score for the bike and pedestrian accessibility at intersections. And then that gives us a way to require developers to install good bike and pedestrian infrastructure, either on existing streets or on their new streets within their development. Also, traffic calming is required both in existing neighborhoods if the new development will increase the traffic, and then in the new development, like on brand new streets, if certain thresholds will be met. So we'd require them to put in stuff like curb bump outs or raised crosswalks or stuff like that if they meet certain traffic thresholds. So with that, I can take any questions.
Dave.
You know, we've always had traffic analysis, or we looked at it. I view this as a little bit of a chicken and an egg. You know, like the development comes in, and you don't really know until council or until planning. You know, all right, we'll allow this, and then you can generate how many vehicles or how many people are going to live there. All right, then we can do the traffic analysis, and people early on, well, this, you know, you see where I'm going with this. You know, in the planning, you have to, all right, this is going to go in, and you have an agreement with the developer, and now the traffic analysis is going to show this. I'm certainly not opposed to this. I'm just concerned about how, I don't know if we have a clear time or sequence how this gets evaluated, because until they, you know, planning submits something, you know, to the council that says, all right, this type of apartment, you don't know what effect it's going to have on the streets, and we really shouldn't be approving anything until we know what the effect is on the streets too. So that's just my not really a question, just my comment.
Yeah, I guess, so this is really, that highlights how this is an iterative process, where, you know, developers have an idea of what they want to install before they come to a planning meeting. You know, staff talks with them, you know, Deanna, Mike, Tim, Tracy, and me, and a lot of other people talk with developers before things ever get to the plan commission. So that's where we would start this TIA process, and then say it goes to plan commission, and plan commission says, no, we don't actually want high density, we want medium density, or vice versa, which is kind of the thing you'd want to look at for a TIA is we actually want higher density here, or something with more traffic. Then they would have to go back update their TIA and present those findings to us and build the streets to that level. So if there's changes through the process, there have to be changes to the TIA. You're right.
A couple questions and maybe a couple recommendations, Ross. Would this development or this criteria guidance that you have, how would it affected like the Terra Vesta? It's a continuously growing one, and we just, was it a year ago? We just chased money to do a bike crossing there. Would the TIA have identified that when it was initially being developed?
So Terra Vesta and all of our big developments, you know, I don't want to put an actual number on it, but, you know, Terra Vesta, I know the TIA was in 2012, so at least that long ago. All those big developments already have TIAs. So even though there's still building going on in Terra Vesta, we would not require them to do a new TIA unless they are proposing a land use or a building type that is not consistent with their previous TIA. So, you know, even after things are approved, you know, obviously things can still change, the market changes, stuff sits for 5 or 10 years, and then all of a sudden you're putting in, you know, a rehab facility instead of an apartment complex. You'd have to go back, update your TIA, and change the streets to that level. So, but you're right, sometimes the TIA doesn't catch everything. It's a kind of a planning level document. So that's why we still pay attention to these things after and while they're being built.
I guess my question, I understand it's been a few years, but the new criteria guidance you have, would it have identified having a overpass or underpass on there?
That's a good question. We might have identified something in the bike and pedestrian level of service criteria, since, you know, County Highway MM is a big pedestrian and bike barrier. That we might have called something out there, but that's kind of since it's kind of in between two developments like Terra Vesta and then Nine Springs on the west side, that's a little bit of an odd situation.
Okay. Another question in both the guidance material and the supporting guidance material that we're not voting on or anything. Sometimes the level of services conflict with one another. Level of service for the bike, for the ped, and then the level of service for the vehicles. In the criteria you use, what takes priority?
It would depend on the situation. So say the motor vehicle level of service is a B and the bike and pedestrian level of service is a D. But then bringing the bike and pedestrian level of service up to a C would decrease the motor vehicle level of service. We would have to kind of make a judgment decision there. So if it wouldn't harm the motor vehicle level of service to a, you know, too much, then we might choose to have better bike and pedestrian features, and maybe, you know, vice versa. So.
Okay, then that was going to be my suggestion. Having worked with a lot of traffic engineers, the vehicle level service always trumps the other ones. I would try to flip that for Fitchburg, especially being priding ourselves as a bike community. And then the only other recommendation I'd have, and again, it'd be in your guidance material that you'd be using on making your selection. It's not in there, and it may be way too specific and important to me again. It's having in your criteria or your guidance or recommendation when you're doing signalized intersection to have eliminate or have a pedestrian activated omission for a dedicated left turn arrow. Those are fatalities waiting to happen when someone's trying to cross and someone has a dedicated left turn arrow on there, that you could preempt that. And as soon as I pressed a pedestrian crossing one, it would preempt that arrow. I would highly recommend we have that in our criteria and spell that out. And the other one I really like, and we do it in Fitchburg here, I don't see it necessarily elsewhere, especially the higher volume roads, is preempt the right turn on red when someone presses a pedestrian light. We have that in certain locations, and I kudos for doing that, but it would be nice to preempt that in a lot more locations, especially with some of the high density development you're doing in a lot of these locations. You got elderly, you got kids, you ought to be preempting it because the vehicles are just interested in looking left, not right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. There are extra points available in the bike, and I think this is in the pedestrian level of service actually, for not having conflicting walk and turn phases. But you're right, I don't think there are points in there for like ending a left or right turn phase when a button is pressed. There's just points for not allowing them to conflict in the first place.
Yeah,
So
and I highly recommend either put it in there for any traffic engineers like yourself looking at it to say, hey, let's give them more points if they're going to throw that in there.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Ross, I've got a couple of questions also on the section we're not voting on. I hope that's okay. So we've got, we're talking about level of service, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that originated in the context of like rural highways where you're trying to go long distances where, you know, something like a level of service D is really going to be, you know, is going to significantly hinder traffic. But that same level of delay in an urban setting in a 25 mile per hour zone really doesn't play nearly as large an effect. Does the letter grade change meaning in different contexts, or are we still talking about like level of service D means the same thing no matter what?
So the letter grade does not change what it means in a different context, urban versus rural, or, you know, speed limit or anything like that. But an engineer might be willing to tolerate different levels of service in those different contexts. So like, yeah, you're right. On an interstate, if you're at a level of service D, that's when, you know, you're right up against the car in front of you. You're not quite like stop and go, but you're not able to just go the free speed that you want to go. Versus if you're on Park Street, that's just kind of how it is. So the DOT engineers and the City of Madison or City of Fitchburg engineers have different contexts that they view those letter grades in. So.
Okay. And I guess going back to Don's point about, you know, how you prioritize, I did notice there's language in there for motor vehicle level of service where it says it must be versus when we're talking about pedestrian and bicycle level of service, the language says should be, which I guess, like to Don's point, baked into the guidance is that motor vehicle level of service always trumps bike and pedestrian level of service. And again, I think that's context dependent, right?
Yes, I think, on a neighborhood street versus a collector or arterial, we'd look at those things differently.
And then, so it says level of service for bikes and pedestrians. It's a scoring system for how easy or difficult it is to cross an intersection. But we have neighborhoods, as you're well aware, that we're not allowed to put sidewalks in. So how does how does getting yourself to the intersection play into the overall level of service? And I guess that's, maybe something that is not applicable to any new developments because we require sidewalks everywhere on new developments. But is that a factor in, should there be some additional language in here for existing neighborhoods?
I'm going to say thankfully this TAA guidance is for new neighborhoods and not our existing neighborhoods. Okay. Because you're right, the neighborhoods that don't have sidewalk would be an F for pedestrian level of service. That's not really in the scoring criteria, I don't think. But if I was scoring them, I would give them an F.
Okay. And then I guess just to kind of give us an idea of some existing level of service, off the top of your head, I'll put you on the spot, something like trying to cross McKee at Fish Hatchery Road. What sort of level of service would that be? Some of the language in there, I should say, is maybe a little bit, I guess I didn't fully understand, how does the crossing distance get factored in? Is it the sum total of the crosswalks, or, to get you from one side of the road to the other, subtracting the refuge islands? Or is it the individual lengths of the crosswalks, from the curb to the first island, and then between the first and second islands, and then between, what I'm asking there, when you're doing the scoring for the length of the crossing, is it the entire thing or is it the individual components?
So I believe it is the entire length of the crossing minus the refuge islands.
Okay.
And McKee at Fish Hatchery, I believe, is a level of service C. We actually went through and scored all of our existing intersections according to these criteria, just so I could get just so I would understand which intersections would score what way. So I would know, kind of a sanity check, to not hold developers to a higher standard than we hold ourselves.
So even though there's 7 lanes that a pedestrian has to cross, I thought there was language in there that said for a 6-lane road, the best level of service you could have is an E or something like that.
That might be an average of the 3 legs. I would have to double check that.
Okay. And then,
but I believe McKee at Fish Hatch was one of our better scoring large intersections because it's newer. So,
is there? You said you've scored these. Is that information? Could that be made public or no?
It could. I could talk with Tim about it. I'd have to clean up the spreadsheet a little bit, but yeah.
Okay. Is that something that Dakota could add to make a new layer on a GIS map?
He could. I could also send out the spreadsheet and make it available.
Yeah.
Be kind of tight with rush hour traffic regardless of how you look at it. That's going to be the problem.
Yeah. I guess one more I'll ask about off the top of your head is McCoy and Sain. That's one of our newest intersections.
I believe that is a D, mostly because of the approach speed on MM, and then the crossing distance. So.
Interesting.
Can I make another suggestion now that you brought up those locations? Your McKee and Fish Hatchery, again, I operationally I think it works very well. The only recommendation I make there, it's not typical, but I'd put a orange backer plate on the no turn on red. Way too much on that dual right turn. They are not heeding that. They're just looking for cars to impede their traffic, and they don't even slow down a lot of times.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So those recommendations I'm anticipating being part of our comprehensive safety action plan, which obviously separate from this TIA guidance, but we'll be getting into that comprehensive safety action plan in the coming year. So
awesome. You demand, Ross.
All right. So I presume we've all read through the actual ordinance change. There's a lot of good language in there. I like what I see. Any other commentary here? If not, I will go ahead and call the vote. All in favor of ordinance 2026-0-21, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
It is unanimous. Thank you, Ross. And moving on to item 7B, I will entertain a motion to approve resolution R15926, acceptance of the Fitchburg Road tree clearing bid.
I recommend acceptance of R15926.
Second that motion.
Motion by Don, second by Dave H. Thank you. Tim, tell us about this one.
So clearing and grubbing need to be completed prior to the private utility relocations for the Fitchburg Road reconstruction project. Public Works has prepared the construction plans and specifications and obtained competitive bids. The project was advertised by legal notice in the Wisconsin State Journal back on June 30th, 2026 and July 7th, 2026, and posted on questcdn.com. On July 14th, 2026 at 11 a.m., we received 2 sealed bids that were publicly opened with the results listed in the attached bid tab. When combining the base bid and alternate one, Homer Tree Services low bid of $65,275 was found to be in compliance with the bidding requirements. The 2026 capital improvement plan includes funding for this project for the total of $71,802.50, and this includes a 10% contingency. So we're looking for council to award the Fitchburg Road tree clearing project to Homer Tree Service.
I'm assuming, with the road width changing, I'm guessing it's electric and gas, maybe telephone underground that has to get moved farther away from the road where the trees are. Is that in
Yeah,
a
that is
nutshell?
correct. And Ross may be able to provide a little more detail. Ross, Alliant and MG&E's up there?
Yes, so Alliant doesn't serve any customers on this corridor, but they do have infrastructure on the west side of the road. And then MG&E has gas and electric here and serves customers. And then there's also, all the various fiber companies that we always deal with as well.
Okay. Thank you.
I didn't see traffic control as a bid item on here. Is that going to be problematic with Homer if they don't do road work?
So that's incidental to this contract. And all of the clearing and grubbing is off the road. So we don't anticipate there being a ton of traffic control needed here besides just narrowing lanes and working on the shoulder.
Do we need to remove any stumps with this? I mean, clearing and grubbing doesn't sound like anything below the ground is taking place.
I believe it includes the root removal, right, Ross?
Root removal.
It does, yes. So that's the part of the grubbing item is removal of roots and grinding stumps and all that stuff.
Okay.
They actually probably won't grind very many stumps. They'll probably just pull them out with an excavator. But
I have a question. How much are we going to delay the traffic through there or shorten it up? Because that is my bus route.
like I said, I don't anticipate there being traffic delays because of this part of the project. Once we get into the actual road construction next year, we'll have detours and everything like that, but not for this clearing and grubbing part.
Oh, that
And this
road,
should only take 2 to 3 days.
to get it all cleared out, okay. Because narrowing that road
Yep.
for a bus going is gonna be mighty tough. It's narrow now for it.
And the deadline for this is August 31st, so it should be complete before school.
It's the next Monday of school.
Nothing was explicitly stated in here, but I assume a tree survey was done. None of these trees have been identified as valuable. Do we have to work around some trees?
On this project, we did do a tree survey, and there were some anecdotes about Native American marker trees in this area. We did very specialized coring on those supposed Native American marker trees and found that they were all less than 80 years old. So there was absolutely no chance they're Native American marker trees. They're just trees that grew a little crooked. So, but none of these are real high value trees. I've gone through this area with
Anna?
an arborist that's been 2 years ago, not with Anna. 2 years ago, I forget the arborist's name, to test those trees, and then also with our city forester, Anna Healy, to do a bat survey. So she's looked at all of these trees that we're removing and didn't have any concerns with any of them.
Other questions for Tim or Ross? All right, seeing none, I will go ahead and call the vote. All in favor of Resolution R-15926, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
It is again unanimous. Moving on to 7C, I need a motion to approve Resolution R-15126, amending the 2026 park fee budget for Terra Vista Park amenities.
I so move we approve resolution R-151-26.
Moved by Dave W.
Second.
Second by Don. All right, Tim, you want to say a few words and hand it off to Mr. Schreiner?
Yeah, so this is a resolution amending the 2026 park fee fund budget for some Terra Vista park amenities. And I'll have Eric kind of go into a little bit more detail on the amenities and kind of where the money's moving from and to.
Good evening, everyone. As Tim stated, this is a budget amendment for the current year's budget. In discussions for the 2027 CIP, we looked at the Ag Park, and it was determined that the Ag Park off of Goodland Park Road where some of these designated funds were to be used is pushed out further in the CIP. So that's why we're pursuing a budget amendment here to take those funds as well as some unallocated park improvement funds for Terravessa and put them into some proposed park developments at the park parcel at the intersection of Frizzy Drive and Spinach Drive. These amenities are going to include an interior sidewalk that links ideally both Spinach and Frizzy, as well as the installation of a park shelter, a water fountain, and community gardens. So there are 4 separate lines that are being proposed here, 2 of which were allocated for the Egg Park that are being reallocated here, as well as 2 lines that were previously unallocated park improvement funds for Terravessa. If we move forward with this budget amendment, then we can start doing some conceptual designing for the amenities at this location.
Questions for Eric? Go ahead, Dave.
No, we're just asking right now for the amount for the design. I see 1475, and I see another 220,000. I see 31,000. What's the total ask here, or what are we?
The total ask, if you take all of those 4 lines, is $348,825. That were all of the that was all of the designated park improvement funds for Terravessa. This isn't allocated at this point for any engineering, design, or construction costs. This is just a lump sum amount for us to begin pursuing this project.
Sure.
What other parks do we have in the Terravessa?
There's the parcel that I mentioned on Goodland Park Road that was proposed for the Egg Park. And then there is a small parcel to the northeast that intersects with the multi-use trail there. There's no currently proposed any park improvements there. The only real parcel that is developable for park property is this large one off of Spinach and Frizzy Drive. The others are, like I said, more of green space areas off of a multi-use trail.
So we don't have any parks in Terravessa? How did that happen?
The one being referenced here is the one at Spinach Drive and Frizzy Drive that currently has a intersection with the multi-use trail as well as a playground currently installed onto it.
Okay.
And right now marked for a soccer field. So this is the proposed improvements of that parcel.
Okay. Thank you, Eric.
Yep.
Done.
You're taking the funds from the Egg Park. Is that no longer going to occur, or is that going to surface a few years from now?
At this point, it's been pushed off to the 2036 CIP based off the discussions and drafting the 27 CIP. At this point, there would have to be some pretty substantial staffing considerations done. We're just not at the capacity at this point to staff and pursue the development of what was proposed for the Egg Park. So very far future plans, potential development, and hasn't completely dropped off the radar, but at this point we wouldn't operationally be able to pursue the proposed developments at the Egg Park. So that's why we're looking to do some park renovations at the existing parcel on Frizzy and Spinach.
Thank you.
So you mentioned a sidewalk and a drinking fountain. Are you also going to have water for the garden, or?
Yep. So this would be water installations. There's currently a lateral coming off of Frizzy Drive. That's what we would tap into for the drinking fountain as well as water service for the community gardens. These community gardens would be similar to what we have at other parks within the city. We wouldn't be changing the wheel or anything like that here. We would implement what we already have implemented just at this parcel. So like I said, nothing is set in stone at this point regarding where these features are going to go within the park. Just at this point, like I said, it would allow us to move forward with conceptual designs.
Okay. What size shelter do you think you're going to have? Would it be worth it to put rain barrels off of that?
Oh boy, I'm not sure. I would probably propose something similar that's been installed at Quarry Hill. Something like a polygon style shelter is what we were talking about here. They normally have sometimes 20 by 20 if they're square, or 20 by 30 if they're rectangular. Regarding rain barrels, I'm not quite sure if it would be enough to really collect rainwater for it. The gardens at least are normally pretty easy to install water lines for, so I would recommend that we move forward with a water line installation. Now, it's not to say collection of rainwater can't be a thing. I just don't know what the size of the shelter would be at this point, if it would be feasible.
Yeah, or even the shape. If it's rectangular, that's one thing, but if it's octagonal or something, then certainly not enough square feet on any one section to really make a difference.
And that's something we can look into once we move forward with design.
I'm good. Any other questions? Nothing. Okay. We'll go ahead and call the vote. All in favor of resolution R 15126, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
It is again unanimous. All right, moving on. Item 8A, announcements. Our next Board of Public Works meeting will be Monday, August 17th at 5:30. A couple other things I'll mention here. This Saturday is the Agora Art Fair. I forget the hours on that, but it's pretty much all day. And then also on Monday, right after our meeting, you could head over to McKee Farms Park, as long as the weather holds out, for the final concert at McKee of the season. Any other announcements we should be aware of? All right, I will take a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
Thank you, Dave.
Second.
Thank you, Don. All in favor of adjournment, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned at 6:31 p.m.